I didn't think to myself, you can have ADHD and then go get treatment. I knew what the treatment would be, but I was like, I have it, but I've been maintaining, and I have this partnership with Mental Health America. I have this clothing company. I'm successful, so I don't really need that help. I just kind of have to get together, but I didn't know how. And he was like, "Oh, if you're open to it, you might want to go and see if you can find a doctor." And he said he went back to his doctor in Atlanta. They gave him medication for it, and when he was describing his before and after, that was probably what sent me over the edge and said, "All right, I'm going to take the plunge and look into it."
From the Understood Podcast Network, this is ADHD Aha, a podcast where people share the moment when it finally clicked that they or someone they know has ADHD. My name is Laura Key. I'm the editorial director here at Understood. And as someone who's had my own ADHD aha moment, I'll be your host. I am so excited to be here today with Dr. Kojo Sarfo. Kojo is a mental health nurse practitioner, a psychotherapist, and a content creator with over 2 million followers on all of his social media channels. That's TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Triller. He's also the author of the book called You Already Won, and he talks about ADHD in his book. Dr. Kojo, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Kojo, I'm so excited to talk to you today. There's so many things that I want to talk to you about, but the first thing I want to talk about, mostly because I'm just a big fan of baseball, but also because I know there's a baseball story that is very meaningful to you, is I want to talk about baseball. Can you tell me what happened in 7th grade?
So I was watching a Atlanta Braves game, and shout out to the Braves. They just won the World Series, and that was exciting for me to witness that. So I was watching a Braves game, and it was a game between the Atlanta Braves and the Washington Nationals. And I'll never forget the batter on the Nationals. His name was Nick Johnson. And he hit a ground ball to first base. And the first baseman, Adam LaRoche, it was a routine play. He should have just scooped up the ball and just jogged over to, first base. If he had walked to first base, he would have got there before the base runner got there. But for some reason, I was watching the game live, and he just kind of froze, like he was as if he was paralyzed, and he just kind of lackadaisically, went over to the first base bag, and by the time he got there, the base runner had beat him to the bag, and me and then the millions of people who were watching were kind of shocked, and we lost the game. The Braves lost the game, and I was upset. And after the game, Adam LaRoche, the first baseman for the Braves, came out and said that he had ADHD. He said he had ADD since he was a child, and it's something that he had struggled with. And I went from being upset that he didn't make the play to connecting with him on that level, and that was kind of like the confirmation, the big epiphany, the moment where I realized that I had that same thing too, because I always suspected it, since 2nd grade, 3rd grade. But when I saw his story, and then I matched it to mine, it started to make sense for the first time.
Yeah, first of all, so brutal for Adam LaRoche. I feel for him on that play. That must have been pretty devastating to go through that. And then also for you as a fan, right? But I'm glad, that it led to this aha moment that you had.
Right.
Question for you. First of all, did you play baseball growing up?
I never played baseball. I had a good friend of mine who, was on the team in high school, and he took me out for batting practice, and I was awful at it. So I'm just a fan.
Okay, got it. I have a hot take that I think that baseball might be one of the hardest sports for people with ADHD to play because there's so much downtime, right?
Oh, wow. Okay, wow. I never thought of that.
Yeah, unless you're like the pitcher or the catcher and you're like constantly in the action. If you're like prone to daydreaming or whatever, it must be,
right.
I feel like it would be a tricky sport for someone with ADHD to play.
I completely agree. I agree.
Well, back to you though. But back to you. Okay, so this was in 7th grade that this happened.
That's correct.
What kinds of things were you noticing in yourself that made you relate to what Adam LaRoche went through?
So I would, like any, child during those formative years, you kind of compare yourself to your peers, and you'll notice that sometimes people will finish their assignments before you. And sometimes, things will take you longer to do, or, you'll be spaced out, and then, you get your report card, and then the teacher would say that, he's daydreaming, he's not paying attention. And I thought that everybody couldn't focus to some degree. So I didn't know that it was like an actual thing. I just kind of attributed it to the fact that, we moved from Norway to Nashville, Tennessee when I was 5.5, 6.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it's because, we had shifted countries and I was just adjusting to a new, country. But I kind of had that issue in second grade, third grade, fourth grade. Like it never went away. So obviously I adapted over time, but I just realized that it just took a little bit more out of me to do what other kids could do in like half the time.
Mm-hmm. And how did that make you feel?
The part that would be frustrating, if anything, frustration was probably the main emotion I could relate to because, I would have to have these parent-teacher conferences where the teachers would say, he's such a bright student. If only he paid attention, he could do better. So I used to dread that because then the teachers would talk to my parents and then they'd say, oh, if you'd only stay awake or if you only pay attention, he'd be a better student. But he's a bright kid. So outside of that, like I found ways to adapt. Like I would be the class clown and I would goof off. I found other ways to kind of build my self-esteem up. But the parent-teacher conferences were very frustrating, as you can imagine.
Yeah. How would you clown around? What kinds of things would you do to distract?
Being like, an immigrant, child in a different country, there's not much you can connect to. So obviously I came to Nashville, the Titans went to the Super Bowl, so everybody was talking about football. So I was making football jokes and, I would try and see what the girls would like to laugh about. And I would just copy whoever was the loudest kid in the class. And then I would make my own jokes. And then, after a while, some of them would land and then that would make you feel accepted. So anything I could do to feel like I was part of, my peers because, I could speak English, but like they could pick up on the fact that, this kid came from a different country. So anything that I could do to kind of, bring attention to myself, it kind of distracted me and the teachers and, my classmates from the fact that like I would be a little bit behind with the schoolwork. So it kind of, helped to, take the emphasis away from the struggles every day.
Right, right. And I wonder, Kojo, like, you do so much. And I mean, you are a nurse practitioner, you are a psychotherapist, you are a content creator with millions of followers. You have you published a book, you have a podcast, right? You do so many things. At what point did you feel like you were maybe becoming a bit of not a perfectionist, but like an overachiever is what I want to say. And does that relate at all to your ADHD?
I think it does. And, when you struggle to find something that you're authentically good at, when you find the first thing that you notice that you do either as good as other people or maybe a little bit better, you latch onto that, and that's what I did because I was a poor high school student. And I remember, my dad was like, what are you going to do after high school? I said, I don't know. And he said, try going to nursing school. You can be financially stable and you can actually help people because you like to help people. So once I got to nursing school and I tried to not fail, but I managed to graduate and I got most outstanding student, I realized that, okay, I'm good at interacting with people. And I was never really good with like the actual skills of nursing, which is funny because everybody was good at that part. But I wasn't really good with like putting in IVs and like I was horrible at that. But I was good at talking to people. So once I found my way, working at the psych hospital, just by talking to the patients, I realized that I think I'm better at this than the average person. And it's an addicting feeling, because for so long when you've had to like bounce around from thing to thing to thing to thing, once something kind of clicks, like you run as fast as possible in that lane and then you try your best to have other things just like that. And I feel like that's how I went from, an RN in the state hospital to where I am now. Because as I try different things and as I realize that, oh, I think I'm good at this, or people enjoy me when I do a certain thing, that's a validation that you never really had growing up. So you just keep doing all these things. And sometimes you do become a perfectionist. But, as I've been educating, I've been also taking notes and figuring out how I can create an environment for myself. Because you can get to this point, but without having that right environment, it's going to be, I would say, it's almost impossible to sustain it. Because as you know, with ADHD, it does affect, all parts of your life.
So maybe less about perfectionism, more about tapping into your strengths.
Right.
And by the way, I have so much love for nurses. I was raised by an RN. So my mom, 40 years, a nurse.
It's a great profession. It's changed my life. I'm so grateful to nursing.
I wanna back up a little bit and talk about the teacher. The teacher is noticing your grades, right? The teacher is talking to your parents. Did you say you moved from Norway?
No, we're from Ghana, West Africa. So we actually left when I was 1. Then we went to Norway, and then I left. We left there in '99, so I was like 6 and a half.
Got it. Okay, so West African family. The teacher is expressing some concerns. How did your parents react?
I don't even think they realized how much I struggled, because it might be easy for them to like, people will come up to them and say, "Oh, is Kojo your son?" Blah blah blah. But I don't think they even realized like how hard it was. Back then they didn't know, and they're learning now. But they moved from West Africa to Europe, and then 6 years later they moved from Europe to Nashville, Tennessee. So they had to endure so much. They worked, as janitors so that they could put themselves through school. So we came from that mentality where, and you see this a lot in foreign, families where it's, no excuses. Like you have to be tenacious. You have to, work hard. Nobody's coming to save you, that type of thing. So for me to complain that I can't focus is kind of like a silly thing. To a family that's working, their butts off to try and put food on the table.
Yeah, like struggling with focus on the hierarchy of needs can seem like a lower level thing, but like
exactly
cumulatively over time, the pain that it can cause, the difficulty that it can cause when you are continuously struggling. I mean, you clearly extremely intelligent, but it doesn't. Maybe it's not showing in the grades, or that's a painful thing, right?
It is.
Did your parents consider, would they have ever considered taking you to get evaluated for ADHD at that time?
I don't think they would have. I don't think they would have. It was more so my mom saying, we'll pray for you. None of my children will have this type of thing. And now in 2022, I know that they have a different mindset. But, like they would not have taken me to get, evaluated. The education was not there. It's not something that they really acknowledged. But I would have had to really kind of, struggle, maybe fail the grade and be on the verge of failing another grade, where teachers, I would have had like an intervention from teachers and counselors and principals who could maybe say, hey, like, I know some kids have this. And even that would have given me maybe a 30% chance to get evaluated.
Okay, so an evaluation probably not going to happen for you as a seventh grader. At that point, you have your Adam LaRoche moment. And then what happens? You carry this with you, right?
Right.
This kind of lack of knowing, but knowing that something's off and maybe it's a possibility. What did you do with that from that time to the time that you eventually got diagnosed, which we'll talk about when you were 25?
So I think when you know that something's not an option, or at least for me, you don't worry about it too much. I completely wrote off the option of getting evaluated, going to a doctor, getting checked out. Like, and never in a million years was that possible. So I spent no time worrying about it. I just spent my time trying to compensate for it. So I put all my energy into, do my best to compensate for what was happening. So I would, high school, I really struggled. High school was brutal. I had fun, hanging with the guys and making jokes and things like that. But anytime it was like time for midterms or finals, it was the worst, because I was in a IB program, actually. So that's like a super magnet program.
That's the International Baccalaureate. Is that what that is?
Right. It's very challenging. So I got into the program, like on my own without the extra support. But a program like that is suited for people who have support, so I just kind of like, did my best, and, I was still able to kind of get away, like nobody would have suspected it because I was in the IB program, right? But I was like I used to say that I was like at the bottom of the totem pole in the IB program. So nobody was like worried about me, like, oh, he's a smart kid. But like I had like multiple Fs. I remember having I went to one final and my grade was like a 48. So I finished in like 2 minutes because I was already going to fail. I couldn't get like 170 to pass the class. So I just kind of, it was physics. I just scribbled something and I just kept it moving. Like I just accepted that F and I said, I'm going to try and make an A somewhere and try and average it to a C, you know?
Also, physics is brutal.
That's the worst class I've ever taken in my life.
What did you do to cope? How did you said you compensated in different ways. What did you do?
So I feel like I've always been, solution-based, and there's actually a strength of mine. I never realized until like maybe even like the last 2, 3 years, reading people's DMs online and trying to, answer questions, but also wanting more insight into myself. And, the one good thing that I will say that my parents did, especially my mom, because she didn't understand ADHD or mental health. So, she just didn't get it. But she would always like say things about us. Like even when I was struggling, she would say, you all are going to be great. You all are going to, change things in this country. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. But she always like spoke positivity into us. So like she kind of got me to the point where I would believe, even when like I was failing, like she was very good at, like, not accepting negative feedback. I remember I had a teacher who said I should work at a gas station instead of, going to college. And my mom went up to the school and she was upset. And she told him, you can't say that to a child in front of like all the other classmates. So she was like a big proponent of speaking life into people and positivity. And that's something that was very helpful because like you would naturally feel hopeless when your grades are so bad. But my mom, in a way, she made it feel like things are going to be okay, so that was the best way of coping. But in terms of coping like negatively, probably the thing I did the most was I would stay up late because I couldn't get things done in time. So I would normally go to bed like sometimes 2, 3, 4 a.m. And wake up at like 7 and I'd sleep through school. And I would get my work done and then, the classes that I enjoyed, I'd get a good grade. But I used to just stay up like all night. Like I felt like I was never really awake in high school because I couldn't get things done in time. So I would just say, oh, I'll just put it off or I'll just do it at night. So that not something that I would recommend.
Yeah. Wow. Awesome on your mom, though. Daydreaming, it's interesting. I don't often hear about men and daydreaming. It usually gets that female connotation of like, I've talked to people on the show even about like being considered ditzy or a space cadet. You get that. It's actually daydreaming is one of the reasons that a lot of women with ADHD go undiagnosed, right? So it's interesting to hear about a man struggling with daydreaming.
And I still do it today, honestly. But like today, I understand that if I daydream all day, I'm going to miss things. I'm going to miss appointments. So like I'll have protected time for myself where like I might ask my assistant, like, do I have these next 4 hours off? And I'll just really like do nothing. Or I might like clean the house or I'll just think. And this is where I get a lot of good ideas from. So I think the daydreaming is not a bad thing necessarily, but when you can't control it or when you're daydreaming, when you should be doing something else, it becomes maladaptive. And that's when it can really hurt you. So like, I've figured out how to turn it into a strength, but every now and then I have to catch myself and put timers on because like since second grade, like I've always kind of like drifted, I might be mid-conversation thinking about something else or my brain's all over the place. I've just kind of learned to reel it in. But yeah, I feel like I've been daydreaming since I was, in second grade, but now I just don't get punished for it as much.
I'm so interested in this technique that you see that seems to be working for you. Like you daydream, but almost with a purpose. Like,
right.
Can you walk me through a specific example of that? Like walk me through a daydream that has, is actually productive in a way.
Okay, so let's say Thursdays, Thursdays and Fridays, I sit down with my publicist and those are days where we like to just brainstorm about different ideas that we want to do. So before that meeting, I like to not have anything that I have to do before then, and I'm even working to where I might just put like one whole day for nothing, where there's nothing that I have to do. So I'll look at my schedule like I do every morning and it'll say nothing, like literally nothing. So if I have a day like that, that's when I wake up, of course, get the dog out, do what I have to do, but I might daydream about whatever. I might watch a documentary on Netflix and I'm thinking about a certain idea and I'll write down on a sticky note, I'll put it in the kitchen, I'll put it, by the computer, and I might think of an idea. And sometimes with the best ideas, you have to do it right then and there. So I'll do it right then and there. Maybe I'll change it to Scrubs if it's a TikTok video or something like that, and then change out. But it's almost like liberating because I feel like my brain's default wants to go to that. Like I want to just kind of be out there and just like free flowing and just think, so like I've trained myself to, follow a schedule and routine, but like, it's like you give yourself a break to just daydream. And then like, as I'm hearing a sound or as if I'm seeing things over and over, because on social media, I want to pay attention to the trends and the algorithm. So if I go outside and I see somebody wearing a certain shirt, and then I go to the mall and then somebody is playing a song by that artist, or if I go on TikTok and somebody's using a certain phrase, I'm like, okay, this is relevant in the culture right now. I might want to pay attention to this. So I might call a friend and then we'll just talk and laugh. And then they'll say, oh, have you thought about doing this or that? Or I saw this video, I think it's funny. And I'll think to myself, oh, if I made the same concept, but I, made it in a way that my audience would gain benefit, value from it, it could be beneficial. So some of my best ideas come from just allowing myself to just think and just daydream and just kind of be out there naturally.
It's great. So you're not punishing yourself for this thing that was looked down upon maybe in your past.
Right.
Yeah. That's inspiring. Thank you for sharing that.
I appreciate that.
I got to get to the part of you being 25 and okay, let me see if I got this right. You're a nurse practitioner, right? You have a clothing line and you are getting your doctorate to become a psychotherapist. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, what happened?
It was funny because I remember I failed the test, and I think I got, maybe it was like a 70 or so. In grad school, you have to have at least an 80. And I knew exactly why. I put things off to the last second, and I was like late at work, so I would have to stay over late, and the information was difficult to comprehend, so I have to go spend time in the professor's office to learn it. The girl I was dating at the time, I remember I would say, let's go out and to the bowling, on Thursday night. And we get to Thursday night and I wouldn't have even started the thing that I needed to work on. I had all week to do it. I haven't even opened it up. And as we get, to Thursday night, she'd ask, are you making progress? I'm like, yeah, I'm 60% done, but I hadn't even started it. So we get to Thursday night and I'll have to cancel because I'm like, you know what? I can't go out and be present. I'm behind, and that'll lead to an argument. And then I had that stress. I had stress coming from everywhere. And it was getting to the point where I'm like, all right, I needed an answer. And I was talking to a good friend of mine who's a medical student, and he's graduated, he's practicing now. And he was saying that, because I described what I was, going through. And he was like, has anybody ever told you that you have ADHD? I'm like, I know I have it, but, I'm like, I have it, but what? I didn't know that you can have, I knew, but I didn't think to myself, you can have ADHD and then go get treatment. I knew what the treatment would be, but I was like, I have it, but I've been maintaining, and I have this partnership with Mental Health America. I have this clothing company. I'm like, I'm successful, so I don't really need that help. I just kind of have to get together, but I didn't know how. And he was like, oh, if you're open to it, you might want to go and, see if you can find a doctor. And he said he went back to his doctor in Atlanta. They gave him medication for it. And when he was describing his before and after, that was probably what, sent me over the edge and said, all right, I'm going to take the plunge and look into it. And it's funny because we talk about it, and I call him every now and then and we joke, but that was actually a pivotal moment in my life. And I don't think I've ever given him I don't think I've ever told him how much I appreciated that. I probably have to call him after this, because as I'm thinking about it, that meant a lot to me, because it gave me the confidence. And then I booked an appointment with my doctor, and then it was the moment I took the medication for the first time. I went to my girlfriend's house, and normally I would go and I'd make a joke or something like that, and I'd have to joke because I'd be late to. I was late to whatever we agreed to do. So I would joke to play it off, but I went to her apartment, I set up my desk, opened the laptop, and I didn't watch any football highlights. I just started to do my work. And then I got my work done, and then I had time left, and I was that's when I realized that I had been playing life on hard mode, for 25 years. And then I was like, oh, this is something that people don't talk about, and it's hiding in plain sight, but there's relief. So that was a huge moment for me.
Hiding in plain sight is such a good phrase to describe it. Yeah, I got diagnosed when I was 30, Kojo, and then when I started to get treatment for it, I was like, oh, this is what it's like to feel quote unquote normal.
Right.
It's
mind blowing.
It is mind blowing. Yeah.
Yeah.
it's life-changing. It just changes your whole
Yeah.
perspective and also helps you be a little kinder to yourself.
And I would say the only other thing that was maybe as life changing was when I got glasses. In the fifth grade. You know,
Right.
putting on glasses, and I looked down. We're living in Jacksonville, Florida at that time. I looked down and I could see the blades of grass, and I was like, "Oh my goodness!" Like people can see like individual like blades. I thought it was just like green,
Oh my gosh.
but like it changed my life. And medication did like a very similar thing.
So in a way, I'm kind of glad, Kojo, that you hit that wall during your doctorate program
Mhm.
because you had managed to like work through it and compensate
Yeah,
like for
yeah.
so long.
No, I'm grateful that things happened the way they happened, and and I mean, we get into this debate about, sometimes people who are diagnosed late in life, you might possibly have some resentment towards maybe your parents or your teachers, and you're like, oh, if I would have, got the help, beforehand, would I have like tapped into like a higher potential, a higher version of myself? But for me, I'm just grateful that I got the help when I got it, and just going the way I did, it kind of forced me to like lean into like coping, how to cope. Like I could figure out coping strategies, because I had so many of them, and like I knew to do that. I knew to talk nicely to myself. I knew to believe in myself. I knew to allow myself to have more time to do things. I would do that naturally. I would set fake deadlines. I would put my car, like if it's 1 o'clock, I'd make my car say like 1:17, because I didn't want it to be like 15 minutes ahead. So I like just
Yeah.
tweak it a little bit. So it'd be like 17 minutes ahead. So that would help me get to work on time because I didn't want to lose my job. Because if I lost my job, that would be more financial stress on top of whatever I was going through. So I found different ways to cope. So it's like once I got the medications, I was like, okay, wow. So like now, like everything is coming together, and I really felt like I could do anything that I wanted to do.
I can't believe you said fake deadlines. That just gave me chills because I've used that phrase before. That was like my number one coping mechanism throughout life was the fake deadline strategy. And I've never heard anyone else use that exact phrase.
Oh, I've been using it for I don't know if I heard from somebody, but I've been doing it for the longest, and that's just my
It was
way
me.
of.
You heard it from me,
I may
Kojo.
have heard
It
it from
was.
you. Great minds think alike. I may have heard it from you, but it gives that sense of urgency, so that way you can do things and not be like scrambling at the last second.
So I want to talk about shame. Last time we talked, you told me that you experienced a lot of shame throughout your life. I think you even mentioned that you almost didn't talk about ADHD in your book.
Right.
Can you tell me about that, the shame and the evolution of that feeling for you?
Right. So, I mean, I think when you jump through so many hoops and you get to the United States, coming from an immigrant family, being a child of immigrants myself and being born in a different country, it's almost like you're trying to measure yourself up with your American peers. Not that you want to be better than them. I just want to be with them. I just want to be accepted. There was a point where I was having like decent grades, A, B on a roll. So when I was up like that, I felt great. And, my self-esteem was kind of tied to my productivity, so it would make me feel good and make me feel like I was like my peers, even though, I have a different name, different last name. I come from a different area. But you never want to feel like you're like an outsider, right? Like I always knew that I was different from people, but like nobody really talked about it. So I was like, whatever. But once I could put a name to ADHD, I kind of started to like look around, and I would Google things or try and see like who else has it, what do people do for it, are they on meds for the rest of their lives? Like I went through the whole rabbit hole, and I didn't see anybody talking about it back then, and we didn't have the short form videos now on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. So there was no safe space for it. So, but it was a big part of my life. I had to put it in my book because it was a pivotal moment to go get treatment, because I don't know if I would have gotten my doctorate without it, to be honest. But the shame that comes with either having it, I think it's having it and then thinking that nobody else has it, or thinking that if people have it, they're not as affected by it as you are. Like yours is just the worst. Like you have the worst case of ADHD in like the history of histories, So I didn't see people talking about it. So when I put it in my book, I was actually like kind of scared to put it out there because I tell people all the time, I'll post a video that will have 1 million views and the next one might have 4 views. I don't really care because I'm not afraid. But the only thing that somebody could have said to me, let's say I didn't talk about ADHD, the only thing that somebody could have said to me that would have made me feel like a little insecure, like right now, would be, somebody saying, oh, you only got through grad school and you only got your doctorate because you took Adderall in college, something like that. And when people say things about you that you don't believe, you're like, okay, whatever. They're just talking with, some mess. But when you actually believe that thing, it hurts in a different level. I made peace with it. So I put, I already written about ADHD in my book and I was going to take it out and I was trying to figure out how would I take it out without disrupting the story, but it just wasn't authentic to take it out. So I just kind of left it out there and I just put it out there. And once I published it and, September 29th, 2019 came and people could buy it, then it was liberating because, you have a book and you can take a video down, but a book is in people's houses for life. So you can't go to the house and take the book away. So I put my story out there and it was any shame that I had, it wasn't there anymore. There's no shame attached to the ADHD at all. And I think when you can get to that, level, it's a powerful thing.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you left it in your book.
I am too. That made all the difference. I don't think I would have been as successful online without chapter 9 in my book. It was very important.
Kojo, I'm curious about a few things related to shame. I'm curious about you mentioning that people are getting, in your DMs, people are talking about what they feel ashamed about. I wonder if maybe, you could give us a few examples of some things that people are ashamed about?
Yeah, so people are ashamed about, their financial situations. I see a lot of men who are ashamed that they can't provide for their kids or for their wives or spouses. A lot of men who feel like if they speak up, they're going to be seen as weak, and they can't be, weak to their women. I see this a lot with mothers where, they think that, if they drop the ball somewhere, they're a bad mom, and that feeling that they're a bad mom, that weighs heavy,
Yeah.
Sometimes people will say, oh, I saw your dance or something like that, and it made me feel things will be okay, and I forgot to take the kids to school, and I didn't do this, and I got into an argument, and I was thinking I was a bad mom, so just seeing those, comments and then making an intentional effort to put content out there that can help people, I think that's, very beneficial for not only me, but for them, so that we can know that, all right, you're going to feel shame, and anything can make you feel ashamed, even depression. A lot of people are, afraid to admit that they've been in bed all day. They haven't brushed their teeth in this amount of days. They haven't washed their hair, or, people are afraid to text their friends back because they're stuck in a depressive episode and their friends are going to think that they ghosted them. So there's so much that goes with shame, and it cuts deep, and it prevents you from it kind of paralyzes you, and it leaves you where you are, which makes the anxiety and everything else worse. So anything that you can do to, try and reduce the shame or just bring down a little bit is going to improve people's confidence.
It does cut deep. I don't know if you noticed that I got a little teary-eyed there, because when you were talking about shame and being a mom and having ADHD, that really resonated with me. It felt like you were speaking directly to me, actually, feeling are you dropping the ball? Or, I really appreciate that. And I know that our listeners will as well. You're good at what you do, Kojo. Well, it's really important what you're doing. I mean, it gives, people are going through a lot, and to hear you talk about the realness, especially as a doctor, it brings a legitimacy to what people are going through.
I think people still need a safe space to get it out, because if you shame somebody and you make them feel they're crazy for feeling a certain way, you can never really get to the emotion behind, what's going on. So, thank God for, therapy. Thank God for even the internet. I always tell people, it's not medical advice. I don't want to get sued, but I wish I had this at 18, or 17. It'd have been helpful to have it as I was graduating from high school.
Yeah, as a tool just to feel less alone and to build confidence. I mean, that's half the battle, right?
Right. And confidence is huge, and people, not to get too far off, but people always say, why should I care about mental health? But confidence is mental health, a lot of times just believing that something is possible, like it's hard to bring something to life if you can't really conceptualize it and like see how that thing would come, to fruition. Like you have to see the thing, before you can go out and do it.
Dr. Kojo, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to ADHD Aha from the Understood Podcast Network. You can listen and subscribe to ADHD Aha on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. And if you like what you heard today, tell someone about the show. We rely on listeners like you to reach and support more people. And if you want to share your own aha moment, email us at adhdaha@understood.org. I'd love to hear from you. You can go to u.org/ADHDAha to find details on each episode and related resources. That's the letter U as in understood.org/ADHDAha. Understood is a nonprofit and social impact organization. We have no affiliation with pharmaceutical companies. Learn more at understood.org/mission. ADHD Aha is produced by Jessamine Molly. Say hi, Jessamine.
Hi, everyone.
Justin D. Wright created our music. Seth Melnick and Brianna Berry are our production directors. Scott Koshier is our creative director. And I'm your host, Laura Key, editorial director at Understood. Thanks so much for listening.